There's a very interesting philosophical idea going around recently that there are only some people in this world who have actual consciousness, while the rest are just mere automatons. So you're basically the player character who is played by you and his actual agency, while the rest of the people in the world are just NPCs being programmed to walk on this earth and do things that they're programmed to do. There was an article at Psychology Today explaining that not everyone conducts inner speech. Isn't it interesting to know that the world contains people who either only occasionally have inner monologues or never have inner monologues at all? The number for these NPCs might be larger than you might think. I don't really know for sure, but it is sure as hell an interesting idea to talk about. And the funniest thing that come out of this revelation is that people are using the term NPC to describe individuals who just simply cannot be reasoned with and will always respond in the same fashion over and over and over again. A good example for this phenomenon was the criticism towards Star Wars that I talked about in my last video. We tried to reason with the journalists and the people who like The Last Jedi in general, but we're never going to be able to do that because they're thinking that we're just white male Russian trolls who are racist and sexist and bigoted and insert buzzwords here. You know what? I think NPC is a really damn good insult for the brainwashed progressives who keep shouting buzzwords at everything they disagreed with. Just call them NPCs because they are. But the NPC meme has caught up to these progressives and they're not really happy when you call them that. Here's an anonymous tweet, for example.
If you sincerely refer to living human beings as NPCs, you are a fascist, an enemy of your own species, and basically a complete scumbag person. Dehumanization is not some cool, trendy thought by Caucasian as hell grad student. It's the capitalist erasure of ethics.
Dehumanization is not some cool, trendy thought. I absolutely agree. I think people should stop calling other people they disagreed with Russian bots or misogynists or bigots. It's incredibly dehumanizing, don't you think? And now let's talk about someone else who is salty.
How the NPC meme tries to dehumanize SJWs.
Oh boy, Kotaku, this is gonna be really damn good. And you know what else is really damn good? Supporting this channel on Patreon. This video is brought to you by my loyal subscribers and patrons. And huge thanks to Banana Boombeam and Bjorn Anderson. You guys are fantastic.
From time to time, and especially if you're a fan of science fiction, you may have had the thought that nobody around you is actually real. That sentiment has taken root in anti-progressive parts of the internet as a dehumanizing meme, and it borrows some familiar gaming terminology.
Okay, just because it's an interesting philosophical idea doesn't mean that it's anti-progressive. The writer then talks about how the meme originated. Out there in the world, there are literal NPCs, which means non-playable characters in video games who have no inner thoughts whatsoever. They only have pre-programmed functions and behaviors that will respond to certain inputs. The writer stated that there are some giveaways for the NPC behaviors, like people saying, "Good weather today, huh?" And while that is a program response that pretty much anyone can make, that's not the defining trait of an NPC.
Part crackpot social theory and part elementary school insult, the NPC meme originated from a deeply comical medley of bogus physics and stupid religion found on the messaging board 4chan.
Now, this isn't technically true. The philosophy of people not having internal thoughts have existed for a while, way before 4chan. It's just that someone on 4chan found out about that theory and formalized their own interpretation on the lack of inner thoughts that people have. The 4chan post stated that the people who are NPCs are unable to change. They already have pre-programmed mindsets and behaviors that they will adhere to 24/7, and the only way for you to change them is if this sick game called real life has actual mod support.
The NPC meme takes things a step further into a political zone where mass outcry against, say, serial harassers, racial injustice, or Trumpian ideas is dismissed as not just inherently uncritical, but prima facie evidence of a lack of human consciousness.
And here's where the writer gives away her identity as an NPC. You see, NPCs have pre-programmed mindsets and it's absolutely impossible for you to change them. Brainwashed progressives are unable to distinguish between criticisms and actual racism, sexism, misogyny, etc. So when this writer talks about people who are outraged against serial harassers, racial injustice, or Trumpian idea, which is rather bizarre inclusion, the writer is just sugarcoating the truth. What really happens is that the writer is dismissing criticisms of the Me Too movement or the progressive movement towards equality or what they perceive as equality. Seriously, try criticizing the progressive movement or the Me Too movement and you're gonna have progressives saying, "Oh wow, you're not for equality of women and minorities? You're not supporting rape victims? How dare you?" Even though you're criticizing the methods of the movement rather than the purpose of the movement itself. Another good example that isn't really related to politics, the BetterHelp BetterHelp controversy that happened recently, where people found out that BetterHelp is pretty much a scam that only takes your money and not actually helping you to, well, get help, the criticisms towards BetterHelp are dismissed by the defenders, saying, oh, so you don't want people to get mental help? You don't want people who suffer from depression to get a therapist? How dare you? Way to completely miss the freaking point there. The writer then highlighted a section where the original 4chan poster talked about how the people who say Trump is Hitler are also NPCs.
If you get in a discussion with them, it's always the same buzzwords and hackneyed arguments. They're the kinds of people who make a show of discomfort when you break the status quo, like by breaking the normie barrier to invoke a real discussion. It's like in a video where you accidentally talk to somebody twice and they give you the exact same lines word for word once more.
I see no problem with this idea. This 4chan guy described the situation perfectly. So what's your issue here, writer?
Essentially, some large portions of society, normies, pop culture fanatics, and Trump haters among others, who speak in cliches are, in fact, NPCs with no internality, agency, or capacity of critical thought, like townies in Pokemon, idly parked outside the same house day and night, constantly ready with the same contrived one-liners. These in real-life NPCs aren't thinking for themselves. They can't.
Well, okay, the writer is just making it clear for us, and yes, that's what the 4chan guy said. I'm glad you got that point. There are people who actually lack self-awareness and actually lack the ability of having inner thoughts. It's an interesting phenomenon that a lot of people find quite unusual and very interesting topics to talk about. Now let's get to your take, writer.
The 2-year-old 4chan post, despite its laughable premise, fueled a meme last month that has some scary implications. How to tell when someone is an NPC, wrote anti-SJW alt-right journalist Ian Miles Chung on Twitter last month. Logic and facts in an argument do nothing to change their minds and only cause them to just repeat themselves ad infinitum like a limited dialogue script that loops on itself in a video game.
What scary implications? He's just describing the reality of the situation. He's telling the truth. Logic and facts in an argument do nothing to change the minds of progressives. They're only gonna get them to repeat the same thing ad infinitum, like a limited dialogue script that loops on itself in a video game. Sorry, writer, but that's the truth. That's how a lot of progressives think. The writer then went on to describe a bunch of people that Ian considered to be NPCs. The first person is someone who thinks that the OK hand gesture is a white power symbol, which, by the way, there are people who still think that way. The next one is someone who might read bell hooks in college to impress a girl in gender studies elective class. I don't know about you, but that sounds freaking programmed to me. People who misuse the word trauma to refer to any mildly uncomfortable experience. Unfortunately, progressive NPCs have this function that lets them to think that anything negative happening to them is a traumatic experience, so I can't blame him to think that. The last one is a New York fact checker who claimed that the vast majority of men simply do not consider women to be full human beings capable of the same vast range of emotions and thoughts and self-conceptions, flawed, weird, unique, whole. That sounds a lot like projection. Men do consider women as human beings. Unfortunately, sometimes women can be terrible human beings, and the sooner you face this reality, writer, the better.
In some corners of the internet, NPC is beginning to replace the term SJW. According to ex-World of Warcraft dev Mark Kern, NPCs have the following qualities: incapable of independent thought, wants everything done for them, like quests, constantly needing coddling, escort quests. He published his checklist after another developer accused him of being a right-wing hack. This tweet evidently was meant to compare so-called SJWs to these NPCs.
Ah, Mark Kern, always base. But seriously though, he's right. These SJWs are incapable of independent thought. They want everything to be done for them, and they constantly need coddling. There's no point to add the part where another developer accused him of being a right-wing hack, other than to smear him as a right-wing hack. And speaking of hack, it's nice to see that the writer has zero self-awareness and tries to dispute the idea of NPCs, but at the same time being an NPC herself who execute the right-wing smear function.
What makes this marginal, stale meme built on edgelord logic worth half a thought is what the idea of an NPC speaks to. NPCs have no agency. NPCs don't think for themselves. NPCs don't perceive, process, or understand. NPCs arrive at the same worldview, not because it's authentic to their experiences, but automatically. As a descriptor, it suggests that those to whom it applies aren't even human, but are rather functionally robots or clusters of computer code. That this has resonated even as wildly as it has is funny, but also a little scary.
I find it interesting that the writer spends most of the article describing the phenomenon rather than sharing her own take. Other than smearing people as alt-right or right-wing hack, she mostly just described the entire thing. So the idea that journalists are activists who signal boost terrible ideas apparently also include the ideas that they find terrible as well. You don't actually prove that the idea is wrong, you just say, oh no, it's terrible. It just highlights your utter laziness in dealing with this, that or your utter incompetence in countering these ideas.
It's one thing to claim that a person's strongly held views are informed by nothing at all, but entirely another to imply that they're completely on autopilot. That is dehumanization, a way to reconceiving your enemies as objects, pawns, strawmen, tools.
Said the writer who called people right-wing hacks. You see, writer, we tried to humanize you. We tried to give you the benefit of the doubt. But unfortunately, you always keep doing things that are dehumanizing to yourselves. No one is to blame for this NPC meme other than you.
At best, dismissing large swaths of people you disagree with this way betrays a lack of empathy for people whose experience is different from yours, and an unwillingness to consider that if a vast number of people happen to agree over something, it may be good to examine why. At best, it is a great utility for spreading bogus conspiracy theories.
It's not that I disagree, it's that it's coming from you.
But who among us can say they have never mashed A as some expository NPC rambled on, wishing all the while they had the option to silence them, or worse?